Hey, what's happening, guys? Good morning, everybody. You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels, and I got an email the other day that kind of stirred up an idea for a video. And so the title of this video is Entrepreneurship: Where to Start. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I got an email from a young man named Brandon, and he said, "I want to start a business, but I don't know what my passion is. Where do I find opportunities?" And he went on to say, "I notice that most people who start a business do it because they are passionate about their products and services. But I don't know what my passion is. Some say don't follow your passion, follow opportunities. How do I do that? Well, searching for my passion, I want to start right away because I know that the first one is probably not going to be successful. Any advice is appreciated." And I think this is a common thing that a lot of people run into, right? Like they want to throw themselves into something. They're enticed by the idea of entrepreneurship. They're motivated and they want to get started, but they don't have the faintest idea of what to do, or how to get started. So one thing I want to kind of lead off this conversation with, and I didn't get this impression from Brandon, but one thing I see from a lot of people is like, I hate working. It's depressing to me that we're going to spend our whole lives working. I hate my boss. I don't want to work. I want to be an entrepreneur. And that, in my opinion, is no reason to be an entrepreneur. Simply, simply saying, I don't want to work, or I don't like to work, or I don't like to work 8 hours a day, or I don't like the structure of work, I don't like having a boss. That is not by default a reason to become an entrepreneur. I think that a lot of times is something that leads people to entrepreneurship, but that in itself shouldn't be a reason to become an entrepreneur. I think almost everybody would rather be doing other things with their 8 or 9 or 10 hours out of their day than working. I think a lot of us don't like working for a boss, but not everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur. I think to be an entrepreneur, you should either have a passion for some industry, you should like solving problems, you should like providing value to people. You should maybe have some innate skill sets or start developing some skill sets that cater to entrepreneurship, whether that be sales or marketing or logistics. But simply not liking to work for a boss or not wanting to work for somebody else isn't necessarily a reason to strike off into entrepreneurship. Like I said, didn't get that impression from Brandon whatsoever, but that's just something I wanted to throw out there because that's something that I see a lot. As far as like where to find your passion, where to find ideas, how to know what to go into, sometimes if you have an interest in an area, pursue it further, learn more about that audience, learn more about that niche, try to figure out what problems they have or what products they're seeking, and try to come up with something to cater to them. But one of the areas that I found the the most success that I've had, I've actually found not necessarily from things that I'm passionate about, but things that I either have some experience in or have some knowledge about, or things that I'm just kind of naturally good at or have some strength towards. Over the years, I'm just going to throw out a couple businesses that I've run, but over the years, I had two landscaping companies. One I started when I was probably, I don't even know, uh, maybe 18, 19, early 20s, something like that. It was a landscaping business. Me and a buddy of mine started it. And then I actually had another landscaping business just a couple years ago. And both of them were very successful. I mean, not making Lambo money or anything like that. It's a landscaping company. It's hard to grow something that large without having like a yard or a nursery or something larger. But we had a lot of success. The first business, I think we ran for 2 years, made a good amount of money, and then sold the business for like 18 grand, which isn't a ton of money, but we were earning money those 2 years, paid off all the equipment, sold the business for $18,000. A couple years later, we started a business. We actually got a late start. We started, I think, in like May, which normally you start getting your flyers and stuff out in like March or April. We didn't even get our equipment until May. It started kind of spur of the moment. Got our flyers and stuff out pretty late. Was using Thumbtack. This is probably back in 2015 or something like that. Ran the business and wound up selling the business in September. So May, June, July, August, September. So only had the business for about 5 months. Wound up selling the business for $28,000 at the end of the summer. Would have probably kept it longer, but we had I was running an e-commerce business and doing some other things at the time. And the plan was actually to have a buddy of ours do all the work. He was going to kind of, grow ownership in the company, and he just wound up being a total nightmare. And it wound up pretty much being me doing most of the work all summer, and then taking calls while I'm out in the field, and then running back to the office at the end of the day to help my partner pack orders. Wound up being a total nightmare. Kind of lucked out, was able to sell the business, turn a profit at the end of the summer, plus made some money along the way. But the reason I got into landscaping, I wouldn't, I kind of enjoy landscaping. I kind of enjoy being outside and being in the sun and kind of working up a sweat and staying in shape and everything. So I mean, that part of it I did like, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I was passionate about lawn care, landscaping. But when I was 14 years old, my dad got me a job with a guy who he knew through a friend who went to our church. My dad got me a job at 14 years old, working in a landscaping yard in Chicago, and every Saturday and Sunday I'd be in there at 6 in the morning, would work until about 5 in the evening, and in summer times I'd actually go out with their crews. In the weekends I'd work in a nursery, but summertime I'd work pretty much 7 days a week going out with their crews. And I learned a lot about landscaping. I learned about landscape design, landscape architecture. I learned how the equipment worked. I learned about what plants you plant in what areas, kind of got to know the prices of mulch and things like that. So when I started my lawn care, my landscaping business, I already had a lot of the knowledge. I already kind of knew how the business worked. And I think that's kind of what set me up for success. Later on, I would get into e-commerce. And I remember when I was probably 19, I had a job at a company called Belt Outlet. And if you want to look them up, it's beltoutlet.com. I'm pretty sure it's a website, or if you just Google Belt Outlet. They sell belts. They sell a lot of travel accessories, outlet converters and things like that. One of their big sellers is these Tilly hats, these really expensive hats. But just kind of a lot of weird kind of gadgets and things like that. And I think I had been kind of casually selling on eBay prior to that. And then years later I would get heavily into e-commerce, and e-commerce is kind of my main thing. But working for this company, Belt Outlet, they had a warehouse, they had a scanning system where, I would kind of pick orders. So I'd go through the warehouse and pick orders. I was also in charge with shipping orders and did a little bit of stuff with their listings, and just kind of working for a real company. I kind of saw the difference between being a small-time eBay seller versus running a full-scale e-commerce business and kind of having scaled up. And this is way before the days of YouTube, when all this stuff is kind of presented to you easily and you can watch videos on how to do all this stuff. There wasn't any of that out there back then. So that was kind of an insight into how an e-commerce business runs. And I think kind of seeing that kind of showed me what an e-commerce business can grow to, how to set it up, what a business that sells things online looks like when it's kind of scaled up. So that was kind of another example where I worked for a company and then kind of saw kind of how that works. Years later, I was part owner in a currency exchange in Chicago, and I'd actually worked for a financial services company prior to that. So, well, I wasn't an expert. I knew a bit about kind of the regulation and compliance. I knew kind of how the business worked. I kind of had an understanding of how the business worked, and that gave me a lot of insights to start that business. And so I would say, most of the things that I've had, there was some other business that I thought of that slipped my mind at the moment, but I would say the most success that I've had in business came from came from starting businesses in industries or fields that I'd actually worked in prior. And I think that's an important thing to note, just because if you ever go on any business forums, Reddit, anything else, one thing a lot of people have a dream of opening a restaurant or opening a bar. Why? I don't know. But a lot of people who have no experience whatsoever in the food services industry, everybody wants to own a restaurant or a bar. And I think most people aren't necessarily that passionate about food. They just think bars are cool, or they think it'd be fun to be the guy who, hey, I think a lot of people want to say they own this restaurant, or they want to be the guy who goes around and shakes hands and says hello to everybody at the table, but they don't necessarily know anything about everything that goes on behind the scenes. And one thing you'll hear most people say is you should never open up a restaurant or a bar without having worked in a restaurant or a bar. And ideally, not just worked in a restaurant or a bar, but kind of had your hands in everything. So been a dishwasher, been a barback, been a bartender, been a GM or a restaurant manager, and kind of had your hands in everything and understand how everything works. So think about this. If you open up a restaurant, you wind up hiring a bunch of employees. Ultimately, you need to know everything about everything. If something goes wrong with the POS system or the cash register, you got to know how to fix that. If there's an issue with the soda fountain in the bar or whatever, you got to know how to fix that. So I think having worked in an environment and actually kind of understanding from every aspect how something works is really important. It's kind of funny. I guess it's not funny. It cost me $2,000. But I had my car in the shop yesterday. I needed new front brakes, new rear brakes, new tire rods, a bunch, alignment, a bunch of other stuff. And I noticed on the wall behind the register a bunch of kind of motivational quotes, and there was something, on a whiteboard. It said, don't try to become successful, try to become a person of value. And there were a couple other motivational quotes. And whenever I see something like that in people's offices, I like immediately know that they're into kind of self-improvement and personal development and all that stuff. And it was kind of interesting. A woman at the register who I guess owns the shop or is part of the family that owns the shop, she said something to me. She's like, you look familiar. She's like, do you own a business or did you just open a business? And I told her, I said, well, no, I used to own a business in, in the town over. I had this, but I said I sold it. And she's like, oh, she's like, oh, that's hard. She's like, I've had a couple dealerships. I had a financing company. Then we opened up this shop across town. 4 years ago, we just recently moved over here. So we kind of got to talking, and I don't think I'm that serious about this, but I think there's a lot of money in auto mechanics. Sure, diagnostic equipment probably costs 5, 10, 15 grand. Like a good mechanic tool set is a couple $1,000s. A lift is probably another 4 grand. Maybe renting a garage is probably $1,500 a month. But they had my car for 3 or 4 hours and charged me 2 grand. Plus they're working on other cars. I'm like, I think that could be a good business to go into. But never in a million years would I dream about trying to open an auto mechanic shop without ever having worked in that industry. And the chances of me doing this are slim to none, but it got me thinking, like, if I actually ever did want to open up an auto mechanic shop, I would go work at a shop for probably a year and kind of try to see how things run, what POS systems are they using, like what problems do mechanics encounter, like what do you do if you can't fix somebody's car, like get an inside look at the business and how it runs before I would ever dream about trying to start a business like that on my own. I think the only other way to kind of get around that, I actually used to have a buddy who, he was like a couple hours short of getting his auto mechanic certification, but he was an amazing mechanic. He was kind of a backyard mechanic. He did a lot of stuff for friends and family on the side, but he wasn't actually licensed. And so if I were to do something like that, I would probably pay for him to finish up his classes, hire him, and then at least I got kind of a known, trusted guy, somebody who I could maybe give a little bit of equity and who could kind of help me start that business because he has, worked in shops and stuff before. But yeah, the whole question of should you follow your passion or just seek out ideas and things like that, I think it really depends. I think if you're doing something content driven, I know nowadays when we talk about business, a lot of people's idea of a business or making money online is something like affiliate marketing or starting a YouTube channel. I think if you're trying to do something content driven like that, I think following your passion is definitely a must because I've had clients who were nursing homes before when it comes to like SEO writing and social media management and things like that. And it's like painfully boring trying to write like landing pages and stuff about senior care centers all day long. I also have clients in the CBD space. I have a client who's a marijuana dispensary. I have a client in the sports nutrition space. All those areas are areas that I find interesting, that I use their products. And I find that creating content for them, creating landing pages for their website, marketing plans, like that type of stuff is a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. Probably A, because I have some knowledge about it, but also because it's something that I actually find interesting. It's kind of a fun subject matter. So if you're doing something content-based, I think it almost is a necessity to follow your passion. I've also started blogs and tried to do affiliate marketing with mesothelioma and auto insurance and health insurance and life insurance. Back in the day, like I kind of came into online marketing, digital marketing right after the MFA or the Made for AdSense days, when you could throw up like a one-page website and make $100,000 a month off Google AdSense. Like I came in on the tail end of that. And you'd always see these articles on like Warrior Forum or Black Hat Forum with like the top 100 highest paying keywords, and like mesothelioma pays like $124 per click. You're never, you or I are never ever going to get that money per click. But I mean, I would see things like that, and I would try to start projects in those niches, and it would just, I'd fizzle out after a couple days to a couple weeks because it's just boring writing about mesothelioma. However, if you find a topic that you're interested in, or at the very least that you have knowledge in, so that you're not having to research every piece of content you create, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Kind of having a brain fart here. Outside of that, I think there is something to be said for following your passion. I think when you follow your passion, it's going to kind of help to kind of stick through those tough times or times when things aren't moving as quickly as you want. But ultimately, I see a lot of people like, oh, I love video games, I should start something in the video game space. Or I love fitness and working out, I should start a gym. Or I love paddleboarding, I should start a paddleboard shop. And something I think a lot of people don't realize is, like, just because you start a business in a certain niche doesn't mean you get to play all day. A lot of times, You're still going to have to do the marketing. You're still going to have to handle payroll. You're still going to have to schedule employees. So if you're passionate about owning a gym, if you open a small gym and you act as a personal trainer, like, yeah, you're going to be doing what you love. But for that business to actually grow and actually scale, eventually you're going to have to hire personal trainers, and your job is going to be kind of managing the business. And while you will own a quote-unquote fitness business, your day-to-day is going to have very little to do with working out and what your passion is actually about. Your day-to-day is going to be paying the rent and paying the employees and managing the payroll and, calling out a plumber to fix a leaky whatever, or buying new gym equipment. Like, once you actually start to scale, you're not going to have the time to just do what you're passionate about all day. Your job basically becomes running the business. And that's why I think trying to find a business that you're passionate about is somewhat overrated. I think kind of the best way to go is find something you're good at, and you'll wind up enjoying it. That's kind of Mark Cuban's thing. That's what a lot of people say. And I'm kind of the same mindset. And I also, I think oftentimes the areas that we're most likely to have success are areas that we've worked in before. So, I mean, if your dad has a construction company or a remodeling company, and from the time you were seven years old, you were tagging along on job sites with them, and you're handy and you know how the business works, like, that's probably a better business to go into than selling private labeling video game controllers just because you like video games. If you work at a company, if you work at a vacuum repair shop or a shop that sells vacuums, and you realize, like, your shop has a 600% markup on vacuum bags, and they're really expensive, and that's a pain point for customers. Well, maybe I could go to Alibaba, find a supplier who makes vacuum bags for Shark and Dysons don't even have vacuum bags, but maybe it's commercial cleaning equipment, and hotels and stuff are paying out the ass, like 600% markups for vacuum bags. Maybe you go find an Alibaba supplier, find a place to get them cheaper, keep the same quality, and you start selling hotels their vacuum bags for 300% markups instead of 600% markups. You get the point. If there's an industry you work in, that's what you do 8 hours a day. You know it like the back of your hand, and you also kind of know what the pain points are. You know how those businesses are run, and I think that's oftentimes where people are going to have the most success. So in terms of being a young person, because I think Brandon probably was like a college or like early 20s guy. If you have no idea where to go, you're not working a job right now that maybe you're working at McDonald's or something, and you really have no dreams of opening a fast food restaurant. Plus, that's kind of a higher startup thing to start, anyways. If there's any area that you're curious about at all, any area that you think might be good for business, go get a job, get an internship, work for somebody for free. Just kind of get out there and have experiences. If you think, being a mechanic could be an interesting business to get into, go get a job at Jiffy Lube. Go get a job in a mechanic shop. If you want to start a landscaping company, go work for a landscaping company. If you want to start a cleaning business, go get a job with a company that goes in the restaurants overnight, which can be actually very, very lucrative. People make thousands of dollars an evening. They go into restaurants after the restaurants close. They clean their fryers. They clean their grease hoods. Steam clean the carpets, clean the floors. Go get a job with a company that does that. See how the business works. See what type of clients they have. Kind of get an understanding for how everything works, and then go launch something like that on your own. So I think the best thing you can do is just get out there and have a lot of experience. I remember when I was young, man, my grandpa used to joke with me. My grandpa, I think for pretty much his whole career, he worked for the Pullman rail cars, but then I think he also had a second job with Rust-Oleum, and he worked in their factory. And I remember me and my grandpa when I was like probably early 20s, and my grandpa said to me, he's like, "Oh, Johnny, man," he's like, you've had more jobs in your 20 years than I've had in my 60 whatever years of life. And I did, I was kind of jumping. I had a million jobs when I was younger. A lot of times I had a hard time kind of lasting at jobs. But I got to experience a lot of different things, and I think that kind of in a way kind of turned me into a jack of all trades. I don't tend to go super deep into anything, but I go very wide. I would kind of consider myself a jack of all trades. I know a little bit about everything, and I think that's kind of helped me in business. So I'd love to hear your guys' input. Like, what are some, for those of you guys who started a business and had some success, how did you initially find that idea? Was it something that you were passionate about and you just wanted to get into? Was it something that you had experience with? Did you work for a company that did that before and you realized like, oh, there'd be an opportunity for me to do something similar? And then also, any other tips, any other suggestions you guys have in terms of like how to find business ideas, how to get your start? I'd love to hear from you guys, as I'm sure Brandon would as well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, click that subscribe button below. And we'll catch you guys tomorrow for another episode of Weird Products Daily. Catch you guys later.